very much. So we're going to talk about how we drove sustainability from the top of the funnel with marketing right down to trying to nail retention, and how we built a kind of multifunctional team to do that. So at Busuu, we're in the business of breaking down language barriers. And we do that by teaching 12 courses written by a team of language experts. And these courses are enriched with a 90 million strong community who give feedback to each other on written and spoken exercises. And this is all augmented with AI-powered learning tools, for example, predictive and adaptive vocabulary and grammar trainers and speech recognition. We have a freemium subscription business model, and Android is our fastest growing platform, is our biggest platform, with some really big year-on-year growth. So as I mentioned, we've got 90 million users, and that's growing very fast at the moment. Our top markets are here in America, China, Russia, Germany, Brazil, and Turkey. We've also got really big penetration in some of the other big upcoming markets: Poland, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, France. There's a really big addressable market out there for people willing to pay for really high-quality self-improvement products. So our story, it starts back in October 2017. We had a fairly new product team that we sort of got together, and we were sitting around watching session replays of people's first experience of the app, and we started to notice some inconsistencies. We also started looking at our other touch points that people would have seen before they even got to the app in Google Play and our advertising, and we noticed some inconsistencies there as well. What we'd found is that we were building different pieces, different teams were working on different pieces, and there wasn't necessarily a consistent narrative that was going through the whole thing. So, for example, in our advertising, we were using different sort of messages: 22 hours to learn a language or 10 minutes a day. We were showcasing features out of context, and we were mixing imagery, colors, and design elements, all sort of slightly different. But what we wanted to do was kind of look for sort of end to end. We wanted to make it a lot more holistic, and we thought about the different steps from that first touch point with the advertising into the Play Store, through to install, then registration, activation, which for us is completing the first lesson, to taking out a subscription and on to long-term retention. And we felt that if we could kind of like tweak each of these steps, we would see a better improvement, like all the way down. Nothing was particularly bad, but we thought there was like movement in each of these things. And we wanted to take it much more, make it much more holistic. So if you visualize the numbers. So each of these dots, imagine each of these dots is someone that you've reached through your advertising. Advertising reach is big. There's lots of fancy algorithms out there to kind of get the stuff in front of the eyeballs of people who might be interested. But of course, as per everyone, only a fraction of that will actually get into the Play Store itself. And then if we zoom into those Play Store users, the people who actually install it, well, we've lost a few more again. And then people who register, we've got a hard registration wall, so a few more gone again. And then down to people who actually finish that lesson, to the number of people who take out a subscription. Okay, I'm sure you recognize this. This is fairly industry standard, I think. So we wanted to take a new approach. As I say, we sort of built different things in different parts, and we wanted to take things a little bit more holistic. We had many channels, and there's different starting points, and we really wanted to sort of do something different. So we built a first-time user experience team. We pulled in people from marketing, from product, from customer service, from our education team and the engineering team to build a new first user experience team. And we found a framework that we could get behind. So Samuel Hewlett has developed a framework called the Elements of User Onboarding, where he looks at the first-time user experience more about building a relationship with users rather than just sort of building user interfaces. He does some very good teardowns of first-time user experiences, which we found really inspiring on his website. And Google, serendipitously, were working with him in London and put us in touch, so we were able to do some work together to try and kind of nail down the key things. And he created a checklist which we felt that we could kind of all get back to and we could refer to, so something we could get around. We also created our own first-time user experience principles, which we felt were sort of thematically important for an education company, about producing language as much as possible, about displaying sort of progress and stats. We set up education principles as well for our content teams. As I say, we embedded the content team within this first-time user experience team, and we sort of got them focused on what was needed to be done to really kind of engage in that first use. And we pulled out the most important things from Sam Hewlett's onboarding checklist about getting users to a quick win, incentivizing social bonds. So we were ready to set off on a journey. But every journey is easier if you've got a map to follow. So we created a first-time user experience customer journey map, and this is it. This is actually a photo of the printed out version, which is on our wall still. And we mapped out the complete journey from the very, very first touch points with our advertising, through to the App Store, through in-app with all the touch points within the app, and onwards to where we expected users to get to after a week of using Busuu. And we interwove this with all the CRM touch points that users were likely to see. And this is still on our wall. We've taken it round. It's changed, but it kind of gives us a sort of like reminder all the time of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to keep it holistic and keep that narrative going. With a map, we could start building out the narrative that would join those touch points. And that narrative was to hold together that first-time user experience and make sure that we had all teams working together. Because if you think about that funnel, often the first part of it is the marketing and acquisition people. And they'd be at a different conference to this, and they'd be talking about the stuff that they'd done. And then there'd be our side of things, the product and engineering, and we'd be at this conference or with other product managers. But we wanted to sort of change that and think about it as a whole, so that narrative could pass down through each step along the way. And this kind of really related to our principles about in the advertising, sort of promising improvements to people's lives and continuing that story on into the Play Store. And then making it as exciting and credible enough that people want to download the app and reinforce those benefits through the registration process, guide people through the app so they really discover what it's about and find value in it to take out a subscription, and then ultimately deliver on the promise of the improvement that we can make to people's lives, and that will be seen through long-term retention. And we really wanted to develop a better understanding of our learners too. We did a lot of user interviews. We did a lot of surveys. We gave diaries to users to fill out. We created personas to uncover patterns. And we got a picture where to focus the narrative around. We found that people wanting to learn a language often came with some apprehension, some anxiety, not knowing what to expect, and some negative feelings. Personally, my first experience of learning a language was with French at school, where if I got a verb conjugation wrong, the old Latin teacher who also taught French would come along, grab the nape of your hair and pull it up as hard as possible until you got the verb conjugation wrong. And so a lot of people kind of had sort of bad experiences, especially sort of in English-speaking countries. We're not so great at learning languages. But often people obviously do come with a determination that can make it work. And we almost saw it like the same as when you start college, all those things, being apprehensive, not knowing what to expect, maybe some negative feelings. And we wanted that first day to be like that first day of school or the first day of a college course where you make buddies, that you focus on setting up yourself for success. So this was, on reflection, one of our first big learnings that really worked for us, is finding a framework and creating a consistent narrative that could get everyone around that story. Okay, so time to get cracking. What did we do? Well, we took ourselves out of the office for a start. As I say, we wanted to break down those silos that are built up. So we took ourselves out of the old office. We took out a WeWork office to create a war room where we took the first-time user experience team. We put all the artifacts up on the wall. We looked at the experimentation data. We watched the session replays. We pored over all those user diaries and such like. We ideated and we experimented over our 2-week sprintly cycles. So, at the top of the funnel with advertising. This was our plan of attack. We wanted to increase Play Store views by increasing our advertising click-through rate. We wanted to improve the Play Store view to install conversion, and we did that through a lot of screenshot testing. And we wanted to ideally improve the installation to registration conversion. So one of the hypotheses that we had was that focusing on the feelings and expectations that learners had would do better, would bringing their goals into the narrative at the beginning would work better for us. There's lots of reasons people learn a language with Busuu, but one of those is because they want to feel like a local when they are traveling. So a lot of people using it for travel purpose, and then they go there and they kind of feel lost without the language. So that's why they sort of like come to Busuu. So before our advertising pieces, we used a lot of our brand colours. But we thought, well, OK, let's bring in that narrative about those reasons why people are learning. And we started using travel images, destination images. And this had a big impact. We saw a 26% uplift in our click-through rates and more people getting to the Play Store. We saw a 5% uplift in the install rate. So once they were there, they were installing it more. And a significantly lower cost per installation, which of course meant then we could spend more money. And this is a really good example where at the top of the funnel, kind of small changes, changing an image, it was really fast, but changing a background image had a really big impact further down. So we could experiment fast and we could do these little small changes that had a big impact. So kind of the next learning for us really, and it was more one of our principles really, but really reinforced that the first-time user experience begins where users first interact with the product, and that's likely to be outside at the very top of the funnel. Okay, onto the Play Store. As I said, this was a lot around iterating and testing different screenshots. So this was our original ones. Didn't really explain what users were going to get to and didn't really address any of their needs. And again, using a lot of the brand colors. So with what we'd learned, we brought in those destination images. We talked about the improvements. So we thought, this will win, no problem. But it didn't. It was actually worse. But we realized we made a simple mistake, and it was another quick experiment that taught us that. Actually, what we'd done wrong is take the screenshots off the devices. Don't know why we did that, but we did. And as soon as we put the devices back on, the installation rate went up. It became our first big win. So, side note, don't forget to keep the devices on the screenshots. Okay. And then we started making small changes to the copy that we were using, to the order, trying to address those feelings of anxiety and struggle people have with learning. And then our biggest win really came back to calling out the actions that people were most concerned with. So focusing not just on the improvements to people's lives, but the actions needed to get to that improvement. And I think this is important because a lot of time we kind of think about that future you, that future me is going to be able to go to Provence and speak fluent French and feel really local. But that future me is also quite abstract, it's far away. And taking the actions needed to get to that abstract future self is easy to put off. So instead, focusing on the actions, what needs to be done to get to that point, and trying to narrow that gap between intention about what you want to be and action about what you can do about it. So that worked. And as you can see by the trend line here, this is our Play Store to install conversion rate. Over the time we were experimenting, it went up quite nicely. We had some nice big wins at the beginning. We saw some dips, thanks to Google's featurings. Please don't stop featuring us. We like these dips. They're good. But obviously, you need to see it in the big picture. They do pull it down a bit. But we saw with the experimentation we're doing a gradual sort of climb up towards the top right, which is what we want. So Next learning for us was really experiment fast at the top of the funnel. Small changes can have a big difference further on. But as per the title of the talk, growth isn't just about getting users in, it's about, to be sustainable, we need to get them to stay in. So firstly, we want to get users to the point in the product where they've seen enough to kind of believe that they can make a change themselves. So for us, that's about getting to their first big win, because we feel that if we get them to succeed, then we'll get them to stay. So most people are coming, to be honest, most people are coming looking for a magic pill. They just want to take a magic pill and suddenly, wow, they can speak fluent Spanish. But that's not going to happen. We can't give them a magic pill, but we can try and give them a magic experience. And that's what we tried to do. We focused in on our map onto day 0, where we wanted to get users to, that activation point, as we called it, which for us was about getting to the end of the first lesson, but also became part of setting up a study plan, which I'll talk about later. We knew these 2 events were linked to continued retention. So it was time to deliver on the promises we'd made about producing language, about meeting the community, and about seeing progress. So as soon as you're in the app, you're on a tailored and personalized journey to understand how the app works and producing language, whether you've got some prior knowledge or whether you've got no knowledge of the language. Our first win is about getting users to produce meaningful language and getting a sense that they can gain fluency. Day 0 is quite short. You've only got a limited amount of time, so that's where we had our education team embedded with us to work within the team they've got. And we started reusing imagery from before, from the experimentations we'd done, inside the actual product, so there was that connect as well, so people were kind of familiar with it. One of the other things that we had in our checklist was about calling out progress. So immediately we started showing progress, about giving people like endowed progress so they could see like meeting daily goals, even if they hadn't really set any, setting out the steps that was ahead of them to create that mental model that, yes, this is going to take like multiple attempts. But for us, really, it's about using language purposely. The purpose of language is communication, and that's where our community comes in. So we wanted people to have meaningful conversations with people from an early stage and use the new skills that they'd learned to complete a task and get an immediate return on investment. So as I said, we've got a big community, and the first task is really introducing yourself to the community and getting you to make social bonds. So this works really well because people love talking about themselves. It's really intrinsically motivating. And then when you send it off to the community, you're going to get something back, hopefully. But you don't know what. It could be feedback, it could be to start a conversation, it could be advice on improving pronunciation if it's a spoken, if you choose to do it as a speaking exercise. There's a variable reward to come back, and because it's different each time, that's motivating. And it also creates triggers. You're going to get a notification that you've got a message waiting for you, so that pulls people back in. So that worked really well. So from a content perspective, we're where we want to be. We've got users producing language, we've displayed some progress, we've incentivized the social bonds. But we still wanted to improve our day 0 conversion, and we still saw people falling off. So we started experimenting with our CRM. Now, previously, we'd sent out a welcome message on day 0, regardless of where you got in the product. But at the Sustainable Engagement Forum in Berlin in October, there was a team from the Mindfulness app who focused their CRM on their activation point, which was to meditate for the first time. And we thought, OK, let's focus our CRM on that activation point for us, which is about getting to the first lesson. But not just that, we try to focus on what had been done and how little there was to get to the goal. The idea that as you get nearer the goal, you increase your effort in order to achieve it. That's called the goal gradient effect. And this had a really, really big impact for us. We had a 67% better open rate compared to that generic day 0 push. And we had a 60% better activation rate of people finishing that first lesson. And it was a really good example of how an embedded marketing team, CRM team, like I think someone mentioned earlier, downstream really helped us. Okay. So that was our kind of next big learning, about getting users to a hero moment, but even if it takes a couple of attempts, you might get knocked down, but you've got to keep up and try again. Okay. And on to retention then. So this, day zero is just one small part. For sustainable growth, we need people to come back time and time again. We need to induce a change of behavior, and especially for language learning, we need to make it habit forming. It's not something you can just pick up. You need to keep working at it. A model that worked for us, that we liked, was B.J. Fogg's behavioral model. And he posited there's 3 things that need to work in tandem in order to create behavioral change. You need to keep the motivation high. So for us, that was about keeping people's goals front and center. You need to make it easy to do. Learning a language can be difficult, but we need to break down that hard to do thing into easy to do chunks. We need to make that scary goal achievable. And you need to create prompts or triggers to keep people coming back. And to do that, we created a study plan. And the success of that has been really important, is now part of our first-time user experience. So the study plan, first of all, we uncover users' motivations. We find out why they are learning. There's different reasons people are learning a language: for travel, for education, for work, for families and friends, or just for fun. So we ask why, and we ask what they want to do with it, which translates as what level of proficiency you want to get to. Then we load the triggers by asking when you will be able to learn. How much time do they have? When are they likely to be able to commit? This is, of course, then the most natural moment to ask permission for push notifications. And then we break down that goal. We make that hard thing easy to do, break it down into something everybody can commit to, and something where the learner can visualize the steps that they are going to be taking. And then this is reinforced throughout the product at touch points when you meet daily and weekly goals, through weekly progress emails. We keep pulling the user back and reminding them of this. And it's had a massive impact for us. You're 5 times more likely to be learning on Busuu 2 months after if you've set up a study plan. And it was so important to us, we pulled it forward when we trigger it, and it's now part of our first act. And it's also become one of the biggest monetization points. So if you've become premium prior to this, once you've made a financial commitment, we give you the tool to keep that commitment going. And if you've yet to become premium, once you've told us the why, the what, the when, we then hit you with a paywall. So then it's like supernatural just to go, of course I'm going to become premium. Okay. So that was a big learning for us. Uncovering motivations, creating that sense of ease, and loading triggers. And one last thing, we had more time than we thought. When we looked at our first session duration over this team, it kept on going up. We had more time to get from learners than we actually originally thought, which was quite interesting. Okay, so zooming back on those key learnings, so what worked for us? Well, finding a framework and creating a consistent narrative and bringing everyone around a single vision really worked for us. And appreciating that things start outside the product when users first interact with us, which is usually through our advertising reach. So that's the space where we can experiment fast. And then once inside the app, getting users to that hero moment, even if it takes a couple of attempts, and creating an environment where we're uncovering motivations, creating a sense of ease, and creating the triggers that will pull learners back in. And it's just a start for us, really. We can always perfect things. We've still got lots to learn and lots to do, but first-time user experience is now a major, major focus for us, and we don't treat it in isolation anymore. We've got our teams working across this, and yeah, we think it's super important and something we will continue to focus on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions?
How has this influenced or impacted the rest of the organization?
How's it impacted us?
Yeah.
I mean, positively. I mean, across the board, we talk about this on our Monday all-hand meeting. So every team, like whether it's finance or BI are involved as well, data science are now involved more as well, like looking for common patterns which we can predict which users will most likely retain. So it's something that everybody touches. It's like, yeah, it's super important.
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm over here. Michael from HelloTalk. We're also a language learning network.
Yeah, got your app on my phone. Don't
Oh, nice. Likewise. So I have a question. This first-time user experience team is really interesting. Is the team solely dedicated to the first-time user experience, or do they work on other parts of the app as well? And if so, did you have some kind of transition period where you pulled people over to do this and then eventually just fully dedicated them to that?
Yeah, so some quarters will have our OKRs. There'll be some OKRs specific about first-time user experience. Some quarters there haven't been, but there's even when we haven't had that specific high-level, company-level focus on it, we've kept the team together and we meet bi-weekly at the very least to look at first sessions, have a look if there's any changes in the marketing to see how that's impacting the sort of the narrative. So we keep it going. There's a constant thread, even if there isn't a specific company level OKR around something that affects the first time user experience. But often there is that high level one. So it is something we've kept a small team together, cross-functional, even if it's not like at that moment the most strategically important thing.
Got it. Thanks.
There was a question here.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sarika Tyagi from Capital One. It was really helpful to see an end-to-end process of uncovering the customer problems. My question here is, I saw that you actually used notifications, the loading triggers part, throughout the spectrum. So I wanted to understand what's your philosophy of using notifications such that it balances out and does not have a negative impact on a customer looking through them?
I mean, that's really important. We saw earlier that the more pushes, I think Jenny showed us, like the more pushes you send people, then you'll get an opt-in out. And it's an area we want to focus on. It's actually something in our roadmap is to have more control so users can turn things off and on, like so they can segment it. We haven't got to that yet, but we do want to be able to allow users to be able to segment the sort of notifications that they've got, so it's not all or nothing. But I mean, for like a messaging, because we've got messaging in app, because of the community aspect, we feel that that sort of side of things, people are more willing to accept pushes for that. Like if you get a WhatsApp or an iMessage, you expect to get a notification. So there's a user's expectation for some things. But yeah, it's something that we are very aware of. And we use canvases, which basically cascade. So you're not always going to get every message. If you've received one type of message, you're not maybe going to trigger another type of message that you would have otherwise triggered. So in the community, if you've had a community-based notification, like someone's corrected your work, you're not going to get the other message which reminds you to come and do your lesson because you've already been in the app maybe, or you've already got the notification. So we have a prioritization tiered system to deal with that. But it's definitely something we are kind of aware of, and we know it pisses some users off. Sometimes, you know, like that happens, and it's something we want to address more. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, one thing.
Hi, my name is Samantha. I'm from Lumosity. Hi. I was wondering how you take the learnings from the first-time user experience and bring them into the rest of the user experience so that the first time doesn't seem segmented from the rest of the experience.
I think, yeah, a good example of that is with language learning, people come with different levels of skill already. So there's different points in the sort of learning journey that they can land into. So we have to work very closely with our education team to make sure the different landing points kind of fit in with the narrative. And we do, like, that's been one of the sort of big changes that we've made to make sure that like any landing point, any kind of checkpoint in terms of proficiency level kind of fits in with this already and is based around sort of the same sort of things as if you came from the very, very start.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Ahmed Darwish from Stars. Can you talk a little bit more about the structure, tools, and the timelines for some of your tests? So, for example, the learning plan one looked awesome, but it looks like a lot of work went into it and would obviously be very difficult to track over time and build out in a completed way. So did you guys test it a little bit, test portions of it first and then gradually build on it? Or talk a little bit more about how you kind of went forward without building the perfect thing for the first time?
We felt that we had a good understanding of the learner problem. Learners were telling us that they were having trouble to manage their time often with language learning. They couldn't find the time. They wanted something to help them manage the time. And so because we kind of felt that, we felt we could afford a little bit more time to kind of build what we wanted. It wasn't like a wild guess, where we will this work, will it not? And where you want to experiment fast, but we were fairly confident. So we gave ourselves a little bit more time. Of course, we didn't build for every platform at once. We built for one platform, made sure it worked. And of course, we kind of did it in a sort of MVP approach as much as possible. We didn't necessarily build in all the back-end functionality that would make it integrated into the product fully. So the very first version of it, a lot of the learning that you do didn't count towards the time. We just didn't want to build every single piece that we knew we would. So we kind of drew a line about not what was just a minimal viable product, but what was a minimal lovable product. What would actually work, what we could kind of get away with, really, in order to kind of test the hypothesis that it would work. And then once we saw that it was working, then we iterated, and then we went back and built the other things that would make it kind of work properly.
One quick follow-up, were there specific tools that you guys used, like an A/B testing platform, or was everything in-house?
No, I mean, we have A/B testing. I think we use Optimize for A/B testing on the app. But we did a lot with our BI team working with us. I mean, with that particular one, because you had the option to opt in or opt out of it, we immediately had lots of cohorts that we could compare the data for. So we didn't actually need to use any particular tool. They would just use our BI team looking at the sort of raw data that we were getting.
And just building on that, Drew Weaver from Lionsgate, the 5 times lift that you saw for users that engaged in the study plan was fantastic. What percentage of users actually went through and actually set up the study plan, and what did you do to try and increase the conversion on doing it?
So there was 2 things we tried to do, not just increase the conversion to doing it, but also actually seeing the trigger to set one up. And that was where we brought it more into the first-time user experience. Because at the beginning, we noticed that only about 70% of users would only ever see the trigger to actually set it up, and we wanted to increase that to near 100. So that's where we experimented with moving it earlier into the journey. And then getting users to set it up, it's now hovering sort of towards 60 to 70%. And we have sort of tweaked a few things to make the steps, there's a few steps there, and we sort of tweak things a little bit to make it more seamless, really. So we did sort of iterate on the number of steps and how to set up, especially around the timings, and especially when we found out that users were over-committing. So I think at the beginning, you're super motivated. Of course I'm going to do half an hour every single day. And obviously then reality kicks in. So we kind of re-engineered that bit to make it kind of less likely to kind of turn the dials up to full. And that actually made it easier and increased the take-up rate and increased the people going through.
Hey, Tim and Chang from the NBA. Thanks again for this presentation. I just had a quick question. If I recall, you mentioned that you actually have a hard registration wall, so a user is unable to almost enter the first-time user experience unless they either, I guess, register as a user. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to that decision and maybe some of the tests that led up to whether or not you just let somebody just enter in the experience and land right in kind of the content right away versus just forcing them to provide information, almost like creating a friction point on deliberately?
It's a discussion we've had with our CEO, who I think came up with the idea many times between the product team. It's not. The idea is that we get more. We know we lose a few people, but it's simple. It's pretty easy. It's like one click and you're in, usually, especially like the social network logins. And we get more from having, like, building up the base of people that we can then, like, direct market to than we do lose. And it's essentially that is the balance, is that, like, although we know that we lose people, and we know sort of in some aspects it's not the perfect situation for the learner, but as an organisation, the benefits, the wins from the marketing side actually outweigh it at the moment. But it's something we want to address because, yeah, I don't think it's the best from an end user perspective. It's not the best, but it's kind of like one of those ones where, like, you know, at this time the marketing team is winning that argument. And yeah, it's something actually, like, we are going to be working on to sort of bring more in before that registration wall. Like, you know, can we sort of bring a little bit more in before it? And that's actually going to be one of the next experiments we do.
Thanks, man.